today I'm here with Gibson Biddle, who's the former VP of Product at Netflix. Hi, Gib.
Hello, Carlos. How are you today?
I'm good. What about you?
I'm good. I'm down in Burlingame. It's, I think, on our 7th or 8th week of home sheltering. I've done 7 weeks of family dinners in a row. That's a new world record. My 22 and 24-year-old daughters are back home.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Gib's been an amazing contributor to the community, so many ways, as a speaker in conferences, live webinars, and now a fireside chat. So I'm very happy to have you with us today. Gib, just to get things started, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, especially how did you get into product management?
Oh, it's like a wild and winding path. It's never straightforward. I was an English major, and then I started a sailing school, and then I wanted to be involved in a creative industry. So I started in the mailroom at an ad agency, and then I was a marketing person, and then I went to business school. And then I joined Electronic Arts in 1991 as a marketing person. And then I was really interested in building stuff. So within Electronic Arts, I switched from marketing into product there. I became an associate producer. And then I just loved it. And so I've been engaged in building products ever since.
So you said that you were an associate producer. Were you aware of the term product manager at that time?
Yeah, I think back then, product managers, I'm older than dirt. Product managers it was kind of a term from like consumer packaged goods like Keebler or General Mills. And I kind of think that Intuit borrowed that phrase and started experimenting with sort of the way we think about modern product management today. At Electronic Arts, they used the term producer because they were borrowing Hollywood industry terms. So this is the early 90s. Now, I have a strong notion of what product management means, and it's usually within the context of technology products, which is really what I've been focused on the last couple of decades.
So how has your philosophy evolved during this time based on the different experiences that you've had as a product leader in different industries and companies?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot, and that's key. I mean, think about how quickly technology changes and the types of products that you're building on. Big shifts. I mean, at the beginning, I was just trying to learn how to build stuff. Get engineers and designers and data science type peeps working together. And that, I did some spectacularly wrong things. So then I began to learn about how important it was to carefully sort of market and package and position your ideas so they would be relevant to your customers or folks that use your stuff. And so I built lots of kids software and built a successful startup. And I sold it. It was called Creative Wonders to the learning company. And then we sold the learning company to Mattel. And then a big learning for me was it's not enough just to build products that delight, but also products that are hard to copy. Because in the kids industry, I created essentially a fad. At some point, you couldn't get on a computer early enough. I built Sesame Street Elmo's Preschool or Sesame Street Toddler. But what happened was we sold the learning company to Mattel, and that was a disaster because we had failed to create hard to copy advantage. So then when I joined Netflix, I learned a lot about this. I call it, your job is to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And then I started to learn a lot about what I call consumer science. So it's the idea that you can A/B test anything. Before, in the 90s, the best you could do was talk to customers in qualitative or focus groups or do surveys. So it was way cool, by 2005 to be able to A/B test anything. Let's test it. Let's see what works or doesn't. And then I was able to bring those same ideas to Chegg, which was my last startup, which is a textbook rental and homework help company that I noticed is doing well because they're in online learning. Yay.
I resonate with your definition of product management, delighting customers in customer enhancing ways that are also hard to copy. So going back to your time at Netflix, I'm very passionate about lifelong learning, and I'm very curious to know how can someone join an organization that is that magnitude and grow to a point that becomes a VP of product? And how do you learn? How can you grow at the same pace as your company so you can continue being the best for your team?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to recognize that growth comes from companies that are healthy and growing. So I had that experience at Electronic Arts. I had that experience at Creative Wonders, that startup. I had the experience at the Learning Company, and I had the experience at Netflix. And to answer your question, and so opportunities created when companies grow. I generally would get promoted because I was really good at hiring and developing teams. So when someone is looking around, who are we going to put, to put them on the new thing? If they see that you have people who are ready to essentially take over your job, that's a good thing. So I was very effective at hiring, developing, and building teams. And then on the learning, I was usually passionate. I was intellectually curious about stuff. But I had one hack I actually didn't realize until I stopped working in the last 5 years. I did something called topic de semaine, which is my bad French for topic of the week. And every Friday morning at 9, I would consciously teach something to my team. I mean, I love teaching. And it turned out that act of hustling on a Thursday night to figure out, what the hell I would say about designing, executing, and analyzing A/B tests, for instance, forced me to learn. So that was one of my hacks. Another hack is you have to stay close to the work. So I was expected to think at a high level, strategy, et cetera, but also to be able to do and execute. At any moment in time, I often had to do the job of one of the swim lanes, I call them, or pods or squads, because it was a new one and I hadn't hired someone yet or somebody had left. But that kept me closer to the work and understanding, think of it as almost a player coach role. Early in my career, somebody gave me bad advice. As you grow up, the details are less and less important. And, in the modern era, you're expected to be able to both think and to understand the execution. So that player coach role was pretty helpful to me.
I think in Silicon Valley, there is this thing which is very common about you have to do things that don't scale to a certain degree until you can delegate and focus on the next thing. So I'm curious, just based on your experience, what are some of those things that you intentionally decided not to delegate and continue doing even though they didn't scale?
Yeah. So, I'm into consumer science, and consumer science, you're trying to develop consumer insight. And there's really 4 sources for that, which are qualitative, usability, focus groups, surveys, asking people what they think, looking at the existing data and trying to get patterns and trends. And the big dog is A/B testing. But to answer your question, we all have different sort of superpowers. And I relied heavily on qualitative and really trying to get the voice of the customer in the head, spending time with customers in focus groups, in usability. They gave me lots of great ideas, and that's not scalable. But I kept doing it persistently and consistently. I would even live stream videos of consumer research folks talking to Netflix customers in Providence, Rhode Island, for instance. I just found it was super important to me to have that constant touch point of the voice of the customer. Those other sources of consumer insight are much more scalable. The survey, which is, you have to be careful because that's what people say as opposed to how they behave. Digging in the dirt with data, and the big dog of A/B tests, those are much more scalable. But I found it super helpful to keep in touch via qualitative. I think the one I already mentioned one, which was I kept doing the teaching, right? I kept doing my Friday morning topic de semaine, mainly because I didn't realize it, but I just loved doing that. And it was one of the tactics that I used to keep building a team where they could scale. So the next time I got promoted, somebody would be there to fill my spot. But I wasn't conscious, and I just did it because I really liked it. But after the fact, I realized it was a good hack, a good way to just make sure you're always learning by going through the conscious act of trying to teach something. I think
I love that.
Isn't there a famous person who talks about that? The way to learn something is to teach it. It's a German. I can't remember who it is. one of our listeners or watchers will figure it out for us.
Yeah, hopefully. I always say that teaching is the ultimate learning. I can't agree more with that. It forces you to really master something so you can extend it to another person. So
that is the
that's
sentiment. That's what I'm trying to communicate. And obviously it's much easier today to learn in bite-sized chews, right? You can do an hour-long webinar at night, or you can spend 4 hours going down the rat hole on Medium, right? So lots of opportunities to learn on the side. But I went to business school for 2 years. I'm glad I did it, but that's certainly not a requirement today.
Mhm. I also want to explore a little bit more about your routine outside of regular business hours. There are so many articles out there about how high-performing executives do wake up very early and do a lot of things, this and that, so they can be very productive at work. Were there any things, I mean, we talked about you forcing yourself to teach your team, but was there anything else that you would say that you were doing that was very healthy for you to be productive and happy at work as an executive?
Yeah, I might disappoint you, but it's funny because I'm thinking about COVID-19 today, and my patterns have changed. In my old life, when our kids were 2 and 4, my wife is a physician scientist. Whoever woke up first would sprint to work, because you got a little extra time for work, and then you had to be home at 10 of 6, essentially to relieve the nanny. So that's just reality. I would say the consistent, persistent thing is I always made an exercise part of my routine. That just makes me feel good. And I always had, side projects and hobbies, things that I love to do. So that's happened for decades for me. In the last maybe 5 years of new reality, I wake up early and I do yoga. Okay, I do Bikram yoga. That's the hot one. And I just do that because, I'm trying my best to age gracefully. And I was tweaking my back like 3 or 4 times per ski season. I love to ski. And so the reality is I just needed to spend more time on yoga. That's a routine that I really love. And it's a routine that I missed during the COVID-19 era. Now I wake up, I scan Twitter, email. I have various sources of data from the work that I do. And then I just quickly sketch on Evernote, essentially a to-do list of my priorities for the day. And I try to stay focused on the more important things at the top of the list in each day. It's a little like product management. Michael Sippy's got a nice definition of a very simple one of product management. He says, create the list, prioritize the list, and then execute the list in prioritized order. So I try to do that in sort of, having daily to-dos.
That's a good mental note to myself as well. It's easy to create that list, prioritize it, but then somehow get distracted with other things.
Well, do the things that you like to do, right?
Exactly.
Like self-managing yourself is really, really hard. I mean, the job of a boss, if it's a great boss-employee relationship, the only hard part is the boss occasionally has to get you to do the things that are important that you don't like to do. But if you're clever and you're a highly effective self-manager, you can self-manage yourself. You just have to be conscious. Okay, if I stare at the true priorities for what's best for me, what's best for the company, what's best for my team, and then you actually are disciplined at doing in the right order, then you don't really need a boss. And all bosses love, employees that can execute well with a minimum of direction.
Yep. Well, that's why there are personal trainers, right?
Yeah.
Half of the work is just show up to the gym, but then you also have to live the way.
Yeah, we're all very undisciplined. It drives me crazy. We're humans, right? And that's funny. I have a course on Teachable, and I realized, people don't move through it nearly as quickly as if I have the people in the same room for a workshop. So being human is hard. Self-discipline is hard, especially during anxiety-ridden times as today.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I open up the floor to questions from the audience, I want to ask you a question about the future. you've been there, you've done that, you've seen product management even before product management was cool. Now it's very hot. Like we have so many companies hiring product managers and people wanting to become product managers. It's this fundamental thing that not just tech companies, but any company needs to organize their products or services. So how do you think about the future? What does the future of product management look like?
Yeah, I mean, if I think about the trends in the last 10 or 20 years, I mentioned one of those, which is how important and how amazing this notion of consumer science is, which is you can form a hypothesis, you can figure out ways to experiment with those ideas in an A/B test, and then you can analyze the results. So my guess is it will continue to get much more discipline from a data point of view. This consumer science notion will get harder. But the good news in all of this is you still require human judgment. I've looked at lots of A/B test results, and there are a number of instances where all of the data says you should choose A, but then there's some higher order things, some key strategic insights that actually cause you to do B, and you're doing the right thing. So that always makes me hopeful that we're not going to be replaced by robots. Human judgment about making great decisions about people, product, and the business will continue to be radically important. So take a lot of statistics, stay in math and science as long as you possibly can. But I say this as an English major, right? The work that we do is both art and science, and combining those two notions is important. And it's hard. And that's why being a product leader, being a product manager is such a fun and exciting job.
So we got a question here exactly about those skills. So in your experience, what are the most important soft skills that a product person can learn in order to grow in their career?
Sure. Hard versus soft. Well, when I'm looking at product managers, I'll put a list of skills on the whiteboard. They are technical. There are management, and probably the softest skill sitting in there is communication. So that's going to be my first answer. Then there's creative, and creative is, gosh, honestly, is that a hard or a soft skill? It's born of passion, of intellectual curiosity, of really digging deep and focusing on a problem. So it's kind of a combination. I look for design skills. Those are soft. I mean, think about how hard it is to create simple experiences on a little phone today. Like, that's hard. So I guess my short answer would be the management skills, especially communication, the creative work. That's really the center of our work. We get paid to create and execute on ideas that matter. And then third, that combination of art and science that has to do with design. And really the focus there is, how do you keep things simple? How do you reduce the complexity? How do you have the discipline not to add too much crap or cut the crap that you already added? So lots of good judgment is required to do those things effectively.
I have to agree. And I think UX design, or design in general, is very underrated. We get a lot of students that are engineers or management consultants. So those two backgrounds are very prominent. But I wish there were more designers thinking about becoming product people. And I'm confident.
We can turn the tide, Carlos. Design is wicked important, right?
Absolutely.
So let's overrate it. Let's give them props all the time.
Definitely. We need more designers thinking product, not just thinking design.
Yeah.
So what would you say? I remember one of your previous answers was about there is no need to be an MBA or having a master's degree in order to be a good product manager. We get this question all the time, but there's another one that is very popular about engineering. back in the day, it's true that a lot of product managers would come from a software engineering background. And what is your take on that? Like, how important is it having a technical degree in order to become a good product manager?
Yeah. So this is one where I have to be very careful what I say. So my first is, this is why you need peers and mentors. And those peers and mentors, by definition, have to care about you, and they have to understand you, and they have to be willing to be candid. So because if I give advice, it's with no context, right? So I get worried that somebody will follow my advice, and I have no idea who they are, what they're thinking about. The reason I went to business school a zillion years ago was I was a marketer, and I realized I could learn so much about all the functions I had no experience with by 2 years in business school. And as much as I like teaching, I love being a student. And then I loved the social experience of being together with my peers for 2 years. And I loved having the time to ski because I was at Tuck, which is at Dartmouth up in New Hampshire. So it worked out great for me. And I came out with a ton of confidence. Every company I sent a email to, was willing to interview me. So it just opened up lots of possibility. Today, I think if your aspiration is to build a startup from scratch, I think you're better off just going out and learning about building a startup from scratch, the hard way, just by doing it. So that's just, one way of thinking about it. I guess at the end of the day, it's a very personal decision, which is, would you like to spend 2 years going to school with your peers and take the hit? You're going to be paying money as opposed to making it. Or do you want to engage in all the amazing educational opportunities that you can take on in bite-sized choose, which is you can read stuff on Medium, you can take online courses, you can do online workshops, like everything's virtual at this point. So I just think that's a very personal decision. On the engineers, I can't offer anything. A lot of my pals went on to grad school in engineering, and they loved it. I think they loved it because of the same reasons I did: the social experience and having time to do other stuff, and taking a summer off. These are all good things. And I can't A/B test this. I certainly felt good from an income point of view within 2 or 3 years. Landing at Electronic Arts was right place at right time. That was great for me. So it paid off for me. But, my guess is I might have had a very similar career if I had chosen not to go to business school. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. In any case, I think it's refreshing for the audience to know that there is not just one path. It's not that you have to be an engineer in order to be a product manager, or you need to be a designer, or you need to be an MBA. It's more about your personal curiosity, your ability to learn and grow and to hustle at the end of the day.
Yeah. So for me, if I try to simplify it, when I'm interviewing folks, I am looking for passion. Like, are the people really, are they passionate enough about the company to really have spent a ton of time with the product? Do they know the space because they care about it? Because that turns into intellectual curiosity. They just want to learn more and more and more. And if you're intellectually curious, then you become persistent, very persistent. And then you develop that grit. So all things being equal, if I find a person that is passionate, whose intellectually curiosity has developed that grit for an idea, like a dog with a bone, I'm like, ooh, this person could pull it off. And even if they've got weak skills, then I just test on their rate of learning. Hey, tell me something you learned in your last job. How did you learn it? Tell me about a failure. What did you learn from it? These are all questions about how quickly do you learn? Because the reality is the set of skills that I have today are probably going to be irrelevant 15 years from now. That's how much the technology in our world changes, which is, in doing the work of product management and working in technology, you have to be engaged in this continual learning because things change really, really fast. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then, go be a mountain guide. Stuff doesn't change as much there.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Gib. This has been fantastic. We've been recording this interview, so we'll be able to offer it to the audience to consume on demand as well. And it was very helpful. So,
great. Carlos, thanks.
Anything else you want to add?
And thank you, Product School peeps and Product School, for having me today. It's been great fun. Thanks so much.